I only ended with that because I wanted to start off on a Father's Day. Kathy?
Oh, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad.
And that's the scripture.
Not like tomorrow or yesterday. He made today in a special day. So let's all rejoice and be glad.
Amen. Hey! What a perfect lead-in for Father's Day. And my only comment, happy Father's Day to the fathers in here.
Yeah.
Just remember, without fathers, we wouldn't have mothers. Which is the real, what's that, Robert?
And without mother, we will have children.
That's right. And so they'd only have the one service. Well, I've shared this message 4 or 5 times now. It's a story I think a great father in Scripture. Interestingly, when we go through Mother's Day, we can get a lot of great mothers. I can get a lot of messages, but I have to struggle a little bit to get good fathers in here. And this is one of them. When Jesus again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him. Then one of the synagogue rulers, Jairis, came there. Jairis was a synagogue ruler. A synagogue ruler was somebody who was in charge of a synagogue. I used to think that if you were a scribe or a Pharisee, you need to be a scribe or a Pharisee to be a synagogue ruler. But I don't think that's the case necessarily. I was looking it up online today so I could be accurate. But he was a ruler. You know who else was a ruler? The rich young ruler in Scripture who came to Jesus and said, "What must I do to be saved?" He was likely a synagogue ruler himself. And generally, the synagogue rulers are fairly wealthy. And that has nothing to do with this story. But the point I want to make is, if you remember, the people that Jesus had the biggest problems with were the Jewish religious leaders. He healed somebody in a synagogue on a Sabbath, which he did. He was blasted and criticized for that by the rulers. So, with Jairis, the people he would run with, the scribes and the Pharisees and the other synagogue rulers, for the most part, would say, "Be careful about this Jesus guy. We don't know who he is. We don't know if we believe him or not. He blasphemes. He forgives sins. Only God can forgive sins. You watch your step, Jairis. You watch your step who you hang with. If you're going to be hanging with Jesus." Right? So, for Jairis to do what I'm going to read right now, realize this wasn't, "Oh, let me check this guy out." For him to do that, he had to be under some deep conviction, either deep conviction or deep distress. Okay? Then one of the synagogue rulers, named Jairis, came there. Seeing Jesus, he fell at Jesus' feet and pleaded earnestly with him. I'm joking. My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she might be healed. Jairis was either a man of faith He was either a man of faith who'd come to realize that Jesus is the one who can do this, or he was so desperate, he said, what do I got to lose? My daughter has died. Either one works. Either way, either reason that brings you to Jesus, whether it's desperation or a joyful moment, like doesn't matter, brings you to Jesus. And so Jesus went with him. He said, did I say that please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live? And then Jesus went with him. Now picture, there's a big crowd. It just said there was a big crowd. Jairus comes out and says, I need you. I need you. Jesus said, fine, I'll go. Right? And interestingly, something of significance happens between here. Jairus' daughter, by the way, is 12 years old. Right? 12 years old. So the large crowd followed Jesus and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. Interesting, this woman has been bleeding, has had an issue of blood for 12 years. And in that situation, in the Jewish faith, if you were having that issue of blood, you were termed ceremonially unclean. You could not participate. And this woman didn't do anything wrong. She was having an issue of blood. I don't know what that meant. That I'll skip on. I'll move on. But she's had it for 12 years. I mean, not once a month. She's had it for 12 years. And it started out so good. And she could not participate in many of the Jewish ceremonies. She couldn't go to she probably couldn't go to this synagogue where Jairis is the ruler because she was unclean. And it says, she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors, and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, this woman, when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. Now, did she have faith?
Yes.
Yes, I think she had faith. Was she desperate? Yes. She had faith and she was desperate. And so she went up and it's like, I don't want Jesus to even see me. Let me just touch his cloak. And she says, if I touched it, I will be healed. And so she touched the cloak, and immediately, her bleeding stopped. Hey, Ron. And she felt in her body that she was free from suffering. Isn't that awesome?
Yes.
Faith, desperate faith, touched the cloth, immediately healed. Don't you wish every healing worked like that? Every situation worked like that. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? And the disciples, in typical blockhead fashion that they're famous for, he says, you see people crying all around you, and you ask, who touched your clothes? I'd have done that. Nuts. But Jesus kept looking around to see who done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And Jesus said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. Isn't that awesome? 12 years. You know, when you talk about why things happen to us, this little girl was born, this little girl we're going to get to in a second, was born around the time this woman started getting the issue of blood. God knew that 12 years later, she was going to be there for that. Isn't it, man? I just, that's just an aside. But we have, I was going to say, Elizabeth, who comes in here, her son-in-law plays Jesus in our plays at church. So I always associate, you know, I always tell people I have the mother-in-law of Jesus, which probably isn't gone scriptural. But I remember this moment when the last time they had this play, and I didn't realize it, but they showed. Remember, Jairis' daughter is dying. Jairis comes to Jesus and needs Jesus to do something now. And Jairis is what? He's a synagogue ruler. You know, he's somebody important. He's used to getting his way. And in the play, they showed Jairis when this lady got healed, just jumping up and down. And I hadn't thought about this. But it was one of two things came to my mind. He's either saying to himself, will you hurry up and get past this woman so you can come to my daughter? Or thank God, look at Jesus, you just touched this woman, and I want you to do that for my daughter. You know. So I'm thinking, he's excited. And then the next verse. While Jesus was still speaking to this woman, some men came from the house of Jairis, the synagogue ruler, and said, your daughter is dead. Why bother this man anymore? Jairis, who was so excited, just a second ago he was so excited, and gets the worst news ever. And then remember this line. Remember this verse. Remember this word from Jesus. Ignoring Jesus. Ignoring what the people said. He looked at Jairis and said, Jairis, don't be afraid. Just believe. Don't be afraid. Just believe. You know what? Take that to ourselves. Take that verse to ourselves. As if Jesus is telling us, call yourself every once in a while, rather than call yourself a jerk, call yourself a Jairis. Call yourself a Jairis. I'm going to be a Jairis today, and I'm not going to be afraid. I'm just going to believe. All right? So, Jesus then went on, did not allow anyone else to follow him except Peter, James, and John. And they came to the house of the synagogue ruler, Jairis. And Jesus saw a commotion, and with people crying and wailing loudly. When somebody dies, that's what you do. Jews even had people that would come and do that professionally, believe it or not, I think. And Jesus says, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. And these people laughed at him. Not laughed like it was a joke. A scoffing laugh. You nuts.
That man might be crazy.
What's that?
I said, this man might be crazy.
Yeah, and might isn't even a word. They're probably saying you're nuts. Jesus didn't say that, but we can assume that. After he put them all out, Jesus took the child's father, the child's mother, and Peter, James, and John in with him to where the child was. Jesus took her by the hand and said, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." She immediately got up, stood up, and then walked around. And it says she was 12 years old. I didn't make that part up. And then it says, at this they were completely astonished. And the they is Jairis' father, Jairis' wife, maybe Jairis' daughter, Peter, James, and John. I'm going to put Peter, James, and John in that category because I would be astonished. I would be amazed. Because every time, just because Jesus does something good for you once, something else happens, it still is amazing. Still is amazing. So, why do I pick Jairis as a great example of a father? One is, when he had a problem, he went to Jesus. He went to Jesus. He had a problem. His daughter had a problem. And like I said, he may not have had great faith, or he may have been desperate. Doesn't matter. He went to Jesus. He went to Jesus in either case. And I know that when he went to Jesus, there were a lot of people, close associates to him, saying, "You're nuts, Jairis. You're nuts. The guy's a blasphemer. Not good. This is going to look good for the high priest when we report you." It could have. And Jairis did it anyway. Jairis did it anyway. And I like to think ahead. This is just my vision of Jairis the father when his daughter, 15 years later, is now 27 years old, and she has a problem. Maybe her child is sick. Maybe her marriage is falling apart. Maybe she's sick again. I don't know what. She comes to her dad and says, "Dad, what am I going to do? I've got this problem, Dad. What am I going to do?" I picture him saying, "Honey, do you remember when you died?" Didn't seem funny when it was first. He says, "Do you remember when you died? Do you remember what Jesus told me? And I've told you, don't be afraid, just believe." And I think that's the legacy that Jairis gave for her daughter came from his actions to go to Jesus in that tough time. And what better legacy can any of us give to our kids than to point them to Jesus? Amen?